Conversation with Alan Richards at his home in Aylsham on the 6th of October 2004. Right, can we just start first, Alan, with a conversation about your family? Where were you born?
In Aylsham, in number 100 Cornwallis Avenue. The posh end of Cornwallis Avenue, we used to call that. Yeah, I was born there. Father came originally from Wales. He was born in Wales, but he moved to Yorkshire with his family, and then they came down here, as far as I know. Mother was from the Forest of Dean, the bit that no one wanted.
Were they both coal mining families?
The Forest of Dean had private pits. They were granted it by some king or something, donkey shit. I did hear about it years ago, but it's bringing it back properly. Yeah, I think they were, yeah, because Mother was from Yorkshire. I think that's where they met. I'm not absolutely certain then. Family history is a bit sketchy.
That's all right.
And he worked nights regular. Always remember that. He was always nights regular. He did what they call a pan-turning job.
What was that about?
It's, well, it had finished by the time I ever went to the pit, but as far as I know, it was the conveyors they had then. Once they'd moved the coal and shifted it on the conveyor out, the night shift moved it forward because it didn't move itself. Something like that. As far as I know, that's how it worked. The old boys will be able to tell you more about that bit. Yeah, he was sort of semi-retired by... No, he was still at the pit when I started because there was three of us. The old chap, my brother and me. And we were all nicknamed Dick, which caused a bit of confusion at times. But he retired eventually. It was deaf as a post. Covered in blue scars, absolutely covered. His back, there weren't a lot of flesh, it's all blue scars. Of course, by the time I started, there weren't so much of that. Got the odd ones. And I left school at 1966. I was 15 and a half. I left in the July, had 2 weeks holiday and started at the pit in the August after they'd had their 2 weeks off.
Which school had you been to?
Well, I spent 2 years at grammar school. I passed 11 plus and I hated every minute of it. Even though there was lots of Aylsham lads here, it was very snobby back then. Dover Grammar School for boys, because I hated it so much, and I let them know. They eventually moved back to Aylsham School. Much better, more my sort of school. Yeah, I didn't get any qualifications. I had this bead in my bonnet about I didn't need them, and it was what the establishment wanted me to do. So I just said, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking any exams, and left. And went to the pit.
Was that something your father was happy about?
He never said. Never said. You had to have a job. You couldn't get any money anyway, because you had to have 6 weeks stamps or 6 months stamps before you get dole in them days, if I remember rightly. You couldn't get a penny, so you had to find a job.
And was that the first thought of yours, to go down the pit?
Not really. No, I did spend most of that fortnight running around trying to find somewhere, but there was nothing. Unless you could get in on the ferries, the boats between them, or places like the tan yard, the box factory. That was about it. There wasn't much else. It was all a bit bleak round here for work in them days. So I ended up at the pit.
Tell me about how you ended up at the pit. Did you go for an interview?
Sort of, yeah. Who did I go and... I can't remember how I ended up there. Who used to do the hiring and firing then? I think it might have been Bottle Townsend. It might have been Mr. Townsend, known as Bottle. I think I went to see him, and I don't know if the old chap took me or my brother from down the road. But they'd take anyone, wouldn't they, really? That was at 15 and a half, at the pit. Magic.
So what did you first do when you went to the pit? Did you go on a training course?
Yeah, we were sent to Betsanger. What they called surface training, which meant you only went down the pit once or twice a week, because you wasn't actually allowed to work down the pit till you were 16, but you could do the training. And we did that. That was so many weeks. You had to do so many weeks, 2 days a week. We went to college at Canterbury, because they had their own mining department then, Canterbury College. It was big as well. And that was, I think, was it 16 days we had to do or something like that at the college. until you were 16 then, they kept you at Betshanger on what they called extended training, which meant they had you on the pit top filling bags, sandbags with stemming, like a clay, for the shot firing and whatnot, and all sorts of things like that. Extended training.
So how many people had been on extended training with you? Was there a lot?
Yeah, there was at least 5 that I left school with. We were at Betshanger together.
What did you think about your training at the time? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, well, sort of. We did do a little bit of like shoveling of that down the pit. They showed you how different things were done. Obviously couldn't take you on a proper face, but they had a mock-up. But that didn't have any machinery on it. It was an old style mock-up of hand got. So that didn't really prepare you for the machinery. Yeah, it was interesting because you were learning something all the time. Because obviously the instructors were old boys who'd seen it all and done it all. And it was quite interesting working with them and doing different things. We did what they called road laying, which was laying railway tracks and then take them up again. Then go down a few days later and do it again. But the only bit I really didn't like at Betshanger was riding the shaft, getting on the cage, because it had a steam winder. They had one electric and one steam. And the steam one was mainly used for winding men. And you got it on at the pit top, and steam, unlike electric, doesn't come on gently. So the cage went from 0 to 30 mile an hour straight down in about the blink of an eye. It used to leave your stomach well behind.
So that must have been a baptism of fire for all of you boys.
I don't know about the others, I don't think anyone's ever mentioned it, but it used to terrify me. Yeah. And yet, say the electric, because you can ease it in, it's much more gentle. And then when you got to the bottom and the brakes came on, it sort of squashed you. It was a very strange sensation.
So you got to learn to have your knees bent while you're getting to pit bottom.
Yeah, it sort of like being in a fast lift in a building. Similar sensation. In fact, they've got lifts in buildings that go faster than 30 mile an hour, haven't they? But in them days, it's all open. It's a bit strange. Then when I was 16, I came back to Snowdown to actually work.
There was never any chance you were going to be anywhere else but Snowdown? You were a Snowdown man from the minute you signed up?
I think I knew as much about Snowdown as everyone else from everyone round here. Even the old chap used to sit and talk in the house about it when he felt like it. You know? And my brother was obviously there. So, although you hadn't actually seen these things, you had a pretty good idea about what it was all about. And yes, Snowdown would have been the only place to go. It was Elsham's pit. It was really. That's the way it was looked at.
You mentioned to me one time before about the idea of being bred to go down the pits.
And this goes back to what I was saying about looking for somewhere else to work. There wasn't anything. It didn't occur to me at the time, but it has, as I got older, that it may have been a deliberate thing not to have any other sort of work round here, to make sure you had plenty of men to go to the pit.
And men with the right mentality, perhaps.
Men who've been sort of bred to it, yeah. It's taken me a long time to think this, but it's come out. Yeah.
Something that's been suggested to me is that men like yourself, who were bred for the pits as such, understood the discipline.
Yeah.
Did you find it difficult to, from your own memories, did you find it difficult to be disciplined in the pit when you first went down?
No, because it was such a hostile environment. You knew you all had to watch for each other and yourself, and yeah, it wasn't a place where you could go, oh well, I'll just do that. You look at it 5 or 6 times before you think, yeah, I will do that. You check it was safe. It was very hostile.
Because my feeling is that, knowing 16-year-old boys nowadays, that you would not have expected them to have that responsibility of being in such a hostile environment so early on. Do you think that 16-year-olds in your day were more responsible, or was there something that sort of...
I think we were, in a way, although they say kids mature earlier now. It's quite possible they do, but because there wasn't a lot of money about, you had to go and get some money so you could live. you had an inbuilt respect for anyone who was older than you, because if you did anything wrong they'd tell your mother or father, and so that was drummed into you from a very early age. You couldn't get away with nothing because everyone knew everyone. So yeah, I suppose that was part of it. You went down the pit and you knew one false move, because we'd all seen the funerals, the men going up the road and every man from the pit walking behind it, hundreds of them, when they were killed down the pit.
So tell me about your first job down the pit. Where did you go when you first came back to Snowdown?
Worked on what we called the pit bottom, which was obviously the bottom of the shaft. And when the mine cars came from loading the coal, mine cars were the big truck things, I used to uncouple them because they came out in lots of 24. So then you had to pull a lever to part them, and so they went down one at a time to be put on the cage.
Now you
to
make
come to
that
the
sound
surface.
quite easy, but tell me how dangerous that was.
Oh well, yeah, you didn't want to get in between them at the wrong moment, and you didn't want to get your foot underneath them. And I'd never been quite sure what they weighed, but they were certainly big. They must have gone a couple of ton when they were full of coal. So yeah, although there was things to stop them keep moving, if you made a mistake, you could quite easily be under them. We had runners, what we called runners, when things failed and they came in the pit bottom and didn't slow down, and they went right through the cage one day and out the other side. I forget what happened. The stops, there was things in the rails used to jump up like that to block the wheels, and they climbed over it. There was too much weight. That's right, loco driver put another set of 24 in the back, and it was all downhill, slightly like that, and it just over the top and over the top, and the cage was there, and they went in the cage and out the other side. Yeah.
I would guess you'd get respect for those trucks after that. Like
Yeah,
that.
you're very wary of them. Sometimes the couplings wouldn't open properly, so you'd reach in between. There was a gap like probably a foot, if that. You'd have to get the chain bit then, because you lifted a lever to uncouple them. And if that didn't uncouple them, then because the chain stretched, and you have to reach in and pull the chain. It wasn't too bad.
Looking back on it now, I think you might change your mind.
You didn't ever lose respect for it. No, it was too easy to slip. It was well lit. It was well lit in the pit bottom, but no, you certainly kept your eye on everything that was going on around you. Because they like railway trains. You can't hear them coming, and if anything did come in fast, it would have you. I remember a bloke getting killed by some runners in by near the face. He was an electrician. I reckon they made a hell of a mess of him.
So really, I mean, can you tell me how you were at the end of a day of work at 16 years of age doing that? How tired were you?
It was timing, because you're not really ready for it at that age, I don't think. I don't think you are, not to spend 8 hours underground, although it wasn't hot in the pit bottom or particularly damp. It's being there for that 8 hours, because unlike working on the face, you were there working for 8 hours, because as soon as you got down the pit you started, so there was no sort of half an hour on the train going in. It was a long day really for 16-year-olds. Yeah.
How many people were working with you doing that job?
It very much depended on which shift. On the day shift, 6 till 2, you had all sorts of old fellas that had sort of been brought out from working on the face and whatnot. They went round oiling, greasing, tidying up, general sort of maintenance jobs. They were sort of looked after, I suppose. So there'd be, you'd have a couple of 3 of them at each shaft. The onsetter, now where's the onsetter or the banksman at the bottom? Do you know, I can't remember now. A couple up there and a couple there, that's about 4 or 5, and him, that's 6, and then you'd have the one where the empty mine cars came off the other side, who knocked the catches down so they'd couple together to make a train to go off. I was very well organised. There must have been probably about, on a day shift, about 6 or 7 on each shaft. Yeah. Then you had the electrician and the fitter. Pit bottom had one of each. Afternoon shift, it was a bit quieter. You wouldn't see all the greasers and that on the afternoon shift. Just, there'd only be about 4 or 5 of you on each shaft then, maybe only 4, if you didn't see the electrician or the fitter. And of course you had the deputy, pit bottom deputy. Someone there to keep an eye on everything, make sure it all ran smoothly.
So really, do I get the impression that you were one young lad in a group of much older men? Would I be right?
Yeah, you might get a couple of you. You'd normally have a young one on the full side, as we knew it, and a young one on the empty side, coupling them back up. So yeah, but you couldn't see each other really. You couldn't get to each other because you were each other side the shaft.
I've heard a lot of people talk about the experience of the old men and that experience being passed on to them, that the old men used to look after you. Did you experience that?
Yeah, because if you had a quiet moment, you might get a lull when you were waiting for the mine cars to arrive or snap time or whatever. You'd sit around talking, you listen to them talking about when they used to work in by, as we knew it, on the faces and different things. And you think, oh, well, that sounds interesting, doing this and doing that. But going in by always seemed a bit, well, I don't know, that's a long way from here. I think it was about 3 miles away from the pit bottom, so sort of, I don't know yet. I'm not ready for that yet. I was one of the last ever to go in by out of that gang of lads that I worked with. I went in by, I think when I was 17 and a half, to get ready to go and do my face training at 18 at Betsanger. So I thought I better go and have a look at it. That just involved usually getting the timber up that they used on the face. You get that up to near the face, but you weren't allowed too close because it was dangerous, and you just unload it out the little mine. They had little mine cars for that, half-size ones. Unload it out of them, and tree trunks, lumps of tree about 4 foot long, about quite heavy because it was a lot of it was pine. The sap used to come out and stick to you, and the coldness used to stick to you. You couldn't get it off. It was horrible stuff. And then you chuck them in so the facemen could have them. Or you might be sat in a switch, which was like on a conveyor normally, and if for some reason it had to stop, you would have to turn your conveyor off that fed it. I didn't do much of that. I preferred being near the face and seeing what was going on.
You talk as almost as though it's inevitable that at 18 you were going to go on the coalface.
That's where the money was.
Is that something you think that most young men wanted to do? Is it what you wanted to do?
Yeah, because all the other jobs for 18-year-olds were very low paid. I'm trying to think what I was getting. I know I left the pit when I was just turned 17 and went to the tan yard, and I was getting £3 a week more there than what I was at the pit. But that didn't work out, so I went back. But I can't remember what the wages were before I went on the coal, but it was £27.12 and 6 before stoppages when I did go on the coal. I was taking home about 19.5 quid of that, which seemed a lot of money.
What about the status of a collier?
Well, you were the mainstay of the pit. If you were on the face, whether you be a ripper, stableman or faceman, that was... What is it that bloke, that rugby commentator keeps saying about scrums in rugby? They're working at the coalface, these men at the coalface, he wouldn't know nothing about it, but that is basically what it is. That is where everything, that's the whole reason for the pit being there, to get the coal out. So, yeah. Status, I don't know about that. Amongst your workmates, yeah. Not to anyone else. Not anyone that didn't know anything about the pit anyway.
What about your experiences then going to work on the coalface, your training? You went back to Betshang, I assume?
Yeah, you had to do 100 shifts, and you couldn't do that till you were 18. So I think the training face I think was called sixes. It wasn't very long. I think it was only about 60 yards long. It wasn't a big face like you'd normally have. And it had a plough, the big lump of metal with the teeth on each end that they used to drag up and down with a chain. And it had stables, because you had to have a hole each end for the motors that run the face conveyor, so someone had to dig that out. That had to be bored and fired, shovelled onto the conveyor away from, out the way. And my Uncle Bert taught me stable work.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he was on the training face. Yeah, he taught me stable work, he was in the stable. He nearly cut his ears off the day his hat went. He used to have to set a girder. It's about, I think it's 12 foot long, steel girder. Once you're bored and fired and cleaned up, you pick this girder up to you, balance it on your helmet, and someone else would get a doughty prop, put it under it and pump it up to the roof. Yeah. Well, we stood like this one day and Uncle Bert's string in the top of his helmet went and nearly cut his ears off. His ears were down like that. Oh dear. And Uncle Bert was a really nice chap.
Now, was Uncle Bert at Betsanger's training face, or was he at
Betsanger, yeah. Yeah, he was a Snowdown man, but like a lot of them, as they got older, they moved him over there if they wanted it.
Tell me a bit more about him. What was so nice about him?
He was completely different to my dad. He didn't drink a lot. He was nice to talk to. And he was a nice man in the house. He'd been a prisoner of war. He was as grey as a badger. Well, he was white. Because they only released so many miners to go to war, didn't they? Yeah. And he was one that got released. Yeah. I don't know if he was Japanese or German, depending on which member of my family I speak to. And it wasn't something I asked him about because he probably wouldn't want to talk about it. He was a really nice chap. Him and the old man were like twins.
Strange.
Yeah. He's still alive. He's not very well now, though. Yeah.
So he was Bert Richards?
Richard, yeah. Yeah.
So apart from me losing his ears...
Yeah, this is how you do this and this is how you do that. And you don't go under that bit there, and before you touch that, you hit it at the end of the pick. If it sounds, if it rings, you're okay, it's solid. If it goes dunk, you don't go near it. You get what we call the long ringer, which was a steel bar with a point on the end, and you put it over the top of it and you pull it down. You pull that bit down, don't go under it. Yeah. And that's how they taught you.
That's what you call pick sense, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, you can tell. It's like anything else, if it sounds hollow, you know there's something wrong with it. Yeah, like a wall. That's hollow. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think that you listen to these men because of their experience? Or because...
I think there's a lot of things. The experience, the fact that you were doing something you'd never done before, you had all that rock above you, and if you made a mistake you weren't going to get out of it. Yeah. So you would treat it with those men with a lot of respect because they knew what they were doing. Yeah. You didn't. No, and you, yeah, right, I won't do that. Yeah. I'll do that, yeah. Yeah, as I said, it was a very alien environment. You couldn't explain to someone what it was actually like. You couldn't. People say, is it anything like being in a cupboard? Well, no, not really.
You can't taste black in a cupboard, can you?
No. And if everyone turns their lights on, it's totally black. And you never get that anywhere. It is impossible. Because there's always a glint of light from somewhere. Totally black. They teach you how to... That's right, that's something they teach you at the Betsanger when you do your basic training. If your light fails and there's no lights anywhere, how to get out. You bend down carefully and you find the rails. And you make sure that the breeze is on your face, because obviously that's where the air comes from, the pit bottom. And you follow the rail carefully until you reach the pit bottom. Always remember that bit. Always making sure the breeze is on your face. But really, very rarely you worked on your own. I mean, there wasn't, unless you was on a switch, which if you was actually working, not much of it was a one-man job due to the weight of everything that you're picking up, girders and different things.
So when you finished your training, you came back to Snowdown. Did you go on the market or did you immediately go?
I had to do 40 days improvership because of the different types of working conditions. And it was a face called North 27s. And I was put on, the stints were lettered. from the main gate to the tailgate A, B, and I was put on B stint with a man called Alan Curtis, who was from Elsham, but he moved over Stowey way. Big man. So the first day up with him, we got off the train and they all took their clothes off, and I thought, Obviously I'd seen this before, so I thought, well, I'd better. Just a pair of underpants and boots and socks and belt and helmet, and we started walking. And we walked and we walked. And we went up the gate to the face. And I thought, this is getting very hot, because I'd only ever worked in the tailgate. And the main gate was hot, very hot, and sweaty. And by the time I got to the face, I'd had enough, and it was, what was it? It was about 700 yards in then. Yeah, it was about 700 yards in, and the weight had pushed the floor up, and the roof was coming down, and oh dear. Well, we got there, and I went on the face with Mr. Curtis. It's a good job I knew him. God dear, had some laughs. And I did my 40 days on there with him. Days and afters. An A stint was available. So after my 40 days, the charge hand, who was one of your workmates, but some places called them pufflers, we called them charge hands, who looked after, got you your timber, made sure everything was all right, and lent a hand if you needed it. Would you like A stint? No, I thought, well, at least it'll say we've been on the market getting chopped and changed everywhere. Yeah, all right. Whoa, was that hot? That was hot. After a little while, a job come up in the main gate stable. I thought, well, I've had enough of this, I'm going in the stable. Oh, and that was even hotter because...
You weren't doing your homework, were you?
Oh, I should have noticed, shouldn't I? I didn't particularly like dragging the girders out when the gobs fell on them and pinned them. It was hard work. I wasn't very strong. So the problem being in the main gate stable was that the air came down the face and out, and the stable was in front of it all. So you didn't get a lot of air in there. I quite like that, boring and fiving, and you knew what you were doing every day. You weren't sat in the face trying to get the coal down so you could get the girders in, and it was that hard you took the pick and it bounced off. That could be hard work.
So you were still having to use the pick to sort of get the stables sorted out?
Not so much in the stable, that was just for trimming.
Right.
But on the face, because the plough was only, say, a couple of foot high, and the coal might be 3 or 4 foot sometimes, the coal that the plough didn't take off at the top could be very hard. Snowdown had very hard black coal. And you'd have to get that down so you could move the girders in to hold the roof up. Otherwise you got left behind. So that was a get the pick and try and pull it down job.
So can I just sort of stop you there just to check something, because obviously my knowledge isn't that good, but I'd like to know. So the shearers weren't able to change sizes?
Ploughs.
The ploughs, sorry, they weren't able to change sizes?
They were in sections.
Right.
But you couldn't make them too big, because further down the face the coal might be thinner. Because it wasn't uniform. It did, and the floor did that as well. No. So yeah, no, it was only, it probably left a foot, but that foot could be very, very hard. Yeah.
So how much dirt were you actually taking out at the same time on the bottom? I mean, was it sort of set to not take out dirt, to take all coal, and then you had to pick the rest? Yeah,
it was supposed to just take the coal, but you always had like a soft, I think they called it scud muck, if I remember right. I'm sure that's what they used to call it, scud or something like that. You generally shifted that, because that would be left behind. Once the conveyor went forward, it would be there. You didn't really want to be setting your roof supports on it, because you couldn't always get what we called foot pads, which was a bit of wood to stand the props on. Very rarely got them. So you used to try and dig it down and clean it up so you had a good solid floor.
So when people are sort of looking at the 60s as being automated to some extent, certainly at Snowdown that wouldn't have been the case. Although there's mechanisation, there's an awful lot of handwork still going on.
A heck of a lot, yeah. Yeah, because if you also had the rip, which was at the stable, then the face, then the rip was behind that. Well, the stable only took 5 foot, but then you had to set, I think there were 14-foot rings to make the roadway. So So the rippers came behind, bored and fired the muck that was over the top of the coal to make the archway to put the rings up. That was fun. Yeah, and we had different size shovels for coal and muck, and they were heart-shaped, pointed like. Yeah, and you had a bigger one for coal and muck because muck was heavy, and you didn't want to be shoveling too much of that on in one go. In fact, I'd see my lieutenants found one. It must be David's next door. It's laying out by the shed.
Oh, I'll have a look.
I'll have to show you that.
Please.
Yeah, that looks like a muck one. It looks quite small.
Why heart-shaped? What was the idea of it being
Easier
heart-shaped?
to dig it in. Because you couldn't put your foot on it. They weren't that sort of shovel. They weren't a spade type shovel. They were purely meant for arm work. You would put your knee behind it and push it in with your knee, like most people would. Yeah, you couldn't really put your foot on them. They'd just buckle up.
I've seen a lot of pictures of miners on their knees shoveling.
Yeah.
I think some of the older miners certainly seem to prefer that.
They did at Betsanger as well.
Yeah.
I noticed that there. No, I don't think I've seen many men at Snowdown do that. We tended to stand upright. Yeah. Not on the face. Well, on the face you'd be crouched over, or if he was a big man like Alan had to kneel, I think. He was a big bloke.
Can't have been easy in such a small confined space.
Funny enough, the first Alan was on B stint, he was a big chap. Terry Loomer was on C stint. He wasn't as fat as Alan, but he was certainly knocking on 5'10", I suppose. Peter Fieldsend, he'd be about 5'7", and he was big, which is unbelievable considering the amount we used to sweat. Who was on the next stint? I can't remember who was further down there. But yeah, there wasn't a great deal of room for manoeuvring, no. They used to manage. Of course, they had a lot more shoulder strength because your girders were in pairs. You had 7 pairs of girders each. That was a stint, and one was always like 2 foot in front of the other. And then when you had 2 foot to move forward or so, you'd take the props from underneath that one and move that one forward, and put that one up. Which is when the problem come, because if the muck that fell behind you, the gobs as we call it, trapped the girder, you had to drag it out manually.
What, always manually?
Yeah. Get hold of it, wriggle it about, lift it up and down a few times, because it was usually about 3 foot of it would get trapped, and then you'd have to oik that out. Yeah. Used to cause me some grief. I wish I'd been stronger.
I don't think anybody could have been that strong.
They seem to find it easy enough. They had their upper body strength, being a lot bigger, they could sort of... That was it. Yeah, that was quite a strange part of the job, that. But you preferred it when the gobs fell rather than if they hung up. Because when they were hanging up and you could see back for 50, 60 foot, that was when you could get, instead of the weight being transferred back there, it would come onto the face. And doughty props reset at 20 ton. So if you was working away and you started hearing all this click, click, click going on, 9 times out of 10 the button would go in and we'd all walk off and let it settle.
Seems a very sensible idea.
Yeah.
Tell me about the noise the gob made when it flushed.
Oh. It would, if it came down, if it had been hanging up a bit and it came down in a bit of a rush, it used to blow the air, all the air that was sitting back there. It'd nearly knock you off your feet because it would just push all the air suddenly out of that space onto the face where you were working in this little 8-foot corridor. Yeah, and you get a great cloud of dust and all this air rush at you. The noise was, I'd say it was like, say 20 ton of bottles being dropped and smashing it. It was hard to explain because the rock was very hard and very sharp, and if it broke up okay, yeah, you would get this funny noise. Almost, I suppose, almost like a load of bottles breaking, or yeah. And if you were very lucky, they didn't flush all the way up to the face, so you had to shovel it all out because you couldn't work in it then. If it flushed, you'd have a pile sloping like that to the coal. So obviously then you got the shovel, chuck it on the conveyor, get rid of it.
The when I've seen the sort of the later props used to have this sort of shield that came down to actually protect you from the gob flashing. But you're talking about a time before that happened. How did you keep yourself safe?
You just keep watching it. Because in between each set of girders you had what we call the Desford, which was hydraulic, which pumped up, pinned itself to the roof and the floor, and it had a ram on it that pushed the face conveyor over. And it was incremental, big word, 4 inches at a time. That was how much the plough could cut, and it would push over 4 inches at a time to, I think it was 3'6" the rams used to go out. Yeah, so you had that in between, but there was still quite a big gap in between everything. Yeah, then the powered support come in, they were quite a bit different animal. Yet you had less room to work in with them.
It seemed very enclosed when I looked at them.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
So the gob used to flush. You hopefully were somewhere safe and not in the way.
In the next stint, or on the conveyor with the button in, just waiting for it to settle. Yeah. Then
you just get back to it.
Yeah, get back in there and shovel it out of the way.
So you'd now found the hottest part in the pit to work in.
Well, people say that there was hotter faces. I worked up on some of the 30 odd faces which were further in, and they took a face off 27s because it hit a bad fault called 207s, and they say that was hotter, but maybe it's because it was the first one I ever worked on. It. God.
Tell me if you can what that experience was like. I mean, you can't obviously tell us exactly, but tell me how it made you feel and how it affected you to be working in that heat.
Drained, mostly. It's a strange thing to sweat out of every pore in your body, your head, your arms. You didn't know you could sweat from so many places at once. And nothing, no air to take it away. It was claustrophobic, yeah. And you used to look at it and think, good job it's payday tomorrow, sort of thing. That I think our saying used to be Monday was for the tax man, Tuesday was for something else, and the next 3 days are mine. And yeah, that was about. It's not like a job you can describe to anyone. You're there, and you're doing it purely for the money because there wasn't a lot else about. Not a lot. I enjoyed it because, like we say about the camaraderie, being in a situation where you're all working together. You might argue, you might threaten to kill each other at times, really fall out, but everyone was watching each other, and you were watching yourself and them, and you had the deputy coming up and down and keeping an eye on everything and making sure everyone was working safely. And yet when you wanted timber to do anything, no, we can't get any. That was disheartening at times. I think they used to come down in 4 foot lengths, these flat wooden bars. I can't remember what we call them now. And they were for going over the girders to spread the weight, hold the roof up, and used to go from one to another and all that sort of. But half the time you couldn't get enough. You just couldn't get enough.
So what did you have to do in a situation like that?
Drag them out the gobs. They'd all be broken up and smashed. Drag them out the gobs and reuse them, if you could get them. Oh, it wouldn't be the first time they've been in the gob and you've sneaked back about 10 yards and grabbed a few and run out again. That was a well-known thing, that. And if you had a bad doughty that was leaking, you'd let everyone walk off the face at the end of the shift and then they'd put them swap it for someone else's. I kept wondering why I kept getting bad doughties, and someone told me why it was happening, so I started doing it then, because it was a nightmare getting them repaired.
Was that the case all the way through your work there? Was it always a problem with
what, budget and Scarpa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it always was. You could never get enough timber. Doughties are always a bit... If you sent them out the pit, well, you told them you wanted, say, 5 doughties, they might send 3. So you'd still be working with 2 battens. But the environment didn't do them any good. I mean, all that humidity, just the metal went on them very quickly. Strange thing.